what Fiona and I would like to do is to view career guidance through the lens of using technology in careers practice. And in particular, what we'd like to do in the short time that we have is to look at a citywide collaborative approach. And the city that we're going to look at is the city called Derby, which is in central England, just off the middle. It's in a place called East Midlands region. It's got a population of just over 250,000, and I'll say a little bit more about the characteristics of the city. But we wanted to situate this in a real life city strategy. So my work is very much around careers policy advice to various governments here in the UK. Also, I'm an academic researcher. As David said, my academic home is at Warwick University. But also I'm a careers practitioner at heart, and I have two small businesses that actually focus very much on careers consultancy work. So let me hand over to Fiona to say hello.
Hello everyone, I'm Fiona Baker and I'm Head of People and Skills at D2N2 Local Enterprise Partnership, which probably won't mean a lot to many of you, but there are 38 local enterprise partnerships across England, and their remit is really to drive economic growth, and obviously skills and careers are very much central to that. So that's where I come in.
Thank you very much, Fiona. So we're going to do a double act. I'm going to really lead to begin with, and I'm going to tell the story of a career strategy that's come together in the city of Derby and how that has emerged and how it is unfolding. And then I'm going to put the spotlight on how we're using technology in the city in a primary school setting. Then I'm going to hand over to Fiona, who will explain what's happening in the secondary education area within the city. And then Helen will hand back to me, where we're going to look at how artificial intelligence and machine learning is being applied in a further education, tertiary context. So if I begin very briefly by setting the scene, I've said that Derby City has got a population of just over 250,000. It's got a population that's predominantly a white population, about 80%, but it also has a rich multicultural heritage to it. And indeed, there are many people from Pakistani community. About 5.9% of the population are from the Pakistani community, 12.5% from Asian communities, and 3% from Black, British, and indeed others who will identify themselves of a different ethnic origin. In essence, it's a typical city with a multicultural aspect to it. Now, Derby is a fairly deeply industrial city. Its historical and present day strengths are rooted in advanced manufacturing. And if you think about planes, trains, and automobiles, then Derby City really, in terms of its economy, it has Toyota, the major car manufacturing company. It has Rolls-Royce, the aerospace industry, and Bombardier, where it has a very, very long heritage in terms of trains and manufacturing there. And the city can be characterized really as, on the one hand, it has a population where there are fairly high earners working in high skilled occupations in some of these companies, but it's also got a large small to medium sized enterprises population. And so you have high earners, and then at the other end of the extreme, we have got low earners. And in 2017, the British government recognised that Derby, along with other areas, would need some significant financial investment to help address issues to do with social mobility. And the government created something called opportunity areas, which across England, there are 12 opportunity areas, and they're called cold spots. That's because they're areas really that when you look at social mobility, there are major concerns about the haves and the have-nots, and in particular, opportunities for young people perhaps not being as present as indeed they should be. So that was in 2017. Funding was allocated to the city. And the City Opportunity Area Board, which is chaired by the University Pro-Vice Chancellor, of which there's one university, there's one further education college, and then there's a range of secondary schools, academies, and primary schools. And it was recognised that actually there was a problem with career support, particularly for young people in the city. And so the area board commissioned an independent research programme, which I led, a team to look at something called Championing Careers, Derby. And what we did was we actually looked at over 2,000 consultations with not just school teachers, head teachers, governors. We consulted with employers, and we consulted, most importantly, with young people, over 1,000 young people, on what was working well and what wasn't. And the outcome from that was indeed a technical report which set out a new vision for careers support across the city. And you'll see from these bullet points here, there was a strong need to focus on skills, on careers and choices in a changing economy, that there were concerns about the future challenges, and also an anxiety around what the potential collaborative ambition would be in the city. And so a need for joint education employers and other agencies coming together to look at broadening horizons, and an emerging consensus that high quality career support services were essential. I must apologise if I sound a bit squeaky. I have a little sore voice today. So you can see the link to the report here, which will give you all of the information about how this unfolded. Now, in particular, there were concerns around young people and their levels of qualifications. If you see from this chart here, that many young people, and indeed many young adults, had low levels of qualifications, and this was a major concern. And what was interesting was that a city that has so many apprenticeships and high skills, that we had this widening of the gap in opportunities. Another concern was around young people with special educational needs and disabilities. And just very briefly, you'll see here that about 6% of young people in the city were going straight into work or finding work, compared to the statistic that you can see around that straight line. Much easier for young people without disabilities or other special needs to make smooth transitions. And in essence, there was a requirement for everybody to come together, to put their differences to one side, and to actually have a 5-year careers strategy to work towards. And so the strategy and the approach was to actually segment 3 strategic priorities. Priority number 1 was about early years. What was being done with children and families in the early years? What could be done in terms of school improvement, which Fiona will say more about. And then thirdly, looking at how broadening horizons, what could be done using technology in all 3 contexts. So this is just to give you an overview, and wherever you are in the world, perhaps this will resonate with you, that policies sometimes sit very separately, on the one hand in social mobility, and then in the other hand in economic growth. And so the commitment was to bring the Chamber of Commerce, to bring employers, to bring the local enterprise partnership, the City Council, with all the key stakeholders together, to really look at a careers and employability strategy that could actually provide the foundations for closer collaborative work. And really, the goal was to put children and young people at the centre of this. And most importantly, to sort of pick up on the point that was made earlier, to start early with career-related learning in Derby primary schools as a first stage in addressing some of these issues. So before I hand over now to Fiona, you'll see from this cycle that this was the strategy and the action plan principles that across the city, the leaders, and I include employers and educationalists in that, actually signed up to deliver over a 5-year period. And that's up to 2025. So here's the first example of technology in careers practice. So what happened was that the Area Opportunity Board decided to pilot career-related learning, first of all, in 7 primary schools in 7 of the most deprived wards in the city centre. And the research team which I led was actually commissioned to look at what worked and what didn't. Now, because of time, I'm not going to have enough time to go into the detail of that. But suffice to say that one of the key cornerstones in engaging the schools was to actually use the Our Future Derby, if you like, the banner, and to have within that primary futures, which I think Nick Chambers in day one set out an example of how it's a platform that allows volunteers from industry to connect directly with schools. Now, what happened was that the technology enabled the teachers to actually self-help and to actually register and to find subject specialists that they felt that they could work from around the world. And what was most interesting was that during the pandemic, of course, schools didn't close in England, although some people think that they did, but certainly for key workers, the schools continued to function. And so what happened was that there was a menu of career-related learning activities in the primary schools, as well as the portal. And so schools were able to bring people in to broaden the volunteers, not just from role models in Derby itself, but actually from all around the world. And project-based learning was one of the key elements, a critical success factor in the programme. So for example, there was a pizza parlour not too far away, and there was a competition, and the children had to design a pizza, but not just come up with your idea of a favourite pizza, but to look at maths and how you would measure the ingredients and the relevance of that. Now, there are 2 reports that are available which look at the impact assessment of the initiative. And I think one of the key things I would like to say, which sort of builds on our previous speakers, is that teachers' continuous professional development is really crucial in this, alongside the development of resources. And so there was a resources hub that was developed, which was on off-the-shelf tools for primary school teachers to use, and activities delivered in the assembly, in the classrooms, in workshops. There is indeed an academic article that will be published in the British Journal for Guidance and Counselling in the new year, which will give you the full, if you like, academic overview of the impact of the initiative. But really, I want to hand over to Fiona now, but just to say that one of the key elements within the primary initiative was that the children, we had pre and we had post CRL measurement, and the children were asked to look at skills. How did they rank themselves in terms of problem solving, teamwork, leadership, aiming high, staying positive, being creative, and confidence? And what we found was that there was another aspect. The children were asked how they felt about talking in front of the class. And apart from talking in front of the class, where the children still seemed very, very shy, even at the end of the career-related learning, was that we saw a significant increase in the children's positivity around their key skills called Skills Builder. And the final point I want to make is that from this initiative, we have now been developing a careers and skills log, which is owned by the children, but that using technology, the primary school head teachers transitions group, where they normally report on maths and English and the children's level of ability or achievement, that they now have a paperclip electronically where they are transferring the children's hopes, aspirations and dreams into secondary education across the schools in Derby City. And we're really looking at that to see what the impact of that will be. So I'm going to hand over to Fiona now, who'll tell you about the secondary schools and what's going on there.
Deidre, I don't know if you've just seen, but Fiona says that she has a problem with her connection.
Ah, okay. I'll just keep going then. I'll just keep going.
You keep going. We'll see if we can solve the problem.
Yes. So I said at the very beginning that the city has, on the one hand, the economic agenda that's being driven by the local enterprise partnership, and that it has a social inclusion and a social mobility aspect driven by Derby City Council and indeed many of the third sector community organisations. So what has happened is that in the secondary schools, the LEP has come together to actually create an enterprise advisor network. And the enterprise advisor network is linked to a national network of enterprise advisors. Now, these are volunteers who will go into secondary schools to act as role models to young people. And the LAP have coordinators to help facilitate that. And in England, and in particular in Derby, success is measured through the Gatsby benchmarks, which I can put the link in the chat if anyone isn't familiar with those. But these are benchmarks which guide schools to self-assess on what good career guidance might look like. The goal has been to have greater impact from actually looking at how a spotlight on careers support across the city can make a difference through not just initiatives, but funding. Of course, the big question will be, what will happen when the funding ends, when there is no longer any opportunity area funds? But so far, local governance structures have been put in place, and there is significant buy-in from head teachers and senior business leaders to really make a difference to the young people in Derby. One of the things that we found from the research was that in Derby, by sheer accident rather than planfulness, is that many of the schools, when we did our research, we discovered the affluent schools were receiving the most funding. And indeed, the children of the parents who had the most, if you like, social capital were actually getting more exposure to career support than, for example, the children in special educational needs schools or in other schools in areas of disadvantage. And so the LEP, the Local Enterprise Partnership, with partners across the city, came up with a practical solution which was recommended in the citywide strategy. And that was to have a single site gateway where actually a whole range of labour market intelligence, a teacher zone for resources, an employer space for student and brokerage services, where there could be growth sector profiles, employability skills workshops, a whole host of, if you like, a menu of services could be captured within a portal. And so working with a partner, a new start platform has been created. And this is just one example of a virtual way, an online way of engaging and reaching with the students. It's very early days. It's just been rolled out in the Derby area within the last year. And most recently, what's happened is that the primary schools development has been embedded in the portal so that subject teachers in secondary school can actually see that there's some great work going on in primary and that hopefully they can build upon that. One of the things that I know Fiona was really keen to tell you about was the gateway to virtual career fairs, because many of the young people have not had work experience, and this comes through really, really strong in the research. And so the portal is being used to try and expand virtual career fairs. But in the last 6 months, and I think the point was made earlier by our colleagues in New Brunswick, virtual reality is something now that more and more children and young people are keen to experience. So the LEP has actually provided every school in Derby City with a virtual reality headset, so that children, regardless of where you are in the city and which school that you go to, that you can actually experience virtual reality careers learning through a virtual reality headset. It's technology is sort of paper-based. It's very green and very friendly, but it's something that the city is very proud of and is currently piloting. I'm conscious of time and very happy to sort of pick up on the questions. So forgive me if I just go through a couple more slides and then I'll stop. So one of the big questions in Derby is that how can technology, particularly during the pandemic, where many employers cannot get into schools, how can we continue to intensify career support for young people? And one of the interesting aspects has been to sort of look at what young people are saying about what they want. And I'll come on to that in a second. But what we find is that virtual reality games are something that particularly the younger generation of young people, particularly as they move from primary into secondary, if you think about it, many of them have been at home using technology, and there's a real appetite to use virtual reality more. So as careers practitioners and as a community of practice, what can we sort of think about our practice and what can virtual reality teach us and technology teach us? Having a common goal, action goal and purpose is really important. Breaking it down into levels at a city-wide level to get all the partners to come together. We have to break it down into small steps. We have to learn from our failures. It took a while once the strategy was out for people to begin to actually own the strategy and to begin to embed that. And so we gave them permission to fail and to continue to sort of celebrate the small wins. And most importantly, to rest and recover when there have been really difficult times in the city, particularly challenges of food poverty for some children, having to support families who have lost their jobs, etc. So the final example is in tertiary education. I said at the beginning, there's one college in the city, a further education college. And what the college has done is the college has basically said, we've got a great website, but we know that when people look for courses, they don't say, I'd like to work in a land-based industry. They say, I'd like to be a farmer, I'd like to be a florist, or I'd like to be a horticulturist. And so the college is currently piloting CC, the Derby College Careers chatbot, using artificial intelligence and machine learning. What we've been doing is we've been matching the college courses to standard occupational codes and embedding within a new website, yet to go, the website has gone live, but the bot, it will go live shortly. We're actually wanting to provide in the city a personalized approach. And you'll see here that there will be on the college website an opportunity to ask, who are you? What's your name? To have some personalised dialogue. For would-be students to be able to use videos. We use here an example of I Could video, but we have a whole host of videos that people can watch and use in their own time. And looking specifically at labour market information, we've learned that people often feel nervous about the skills that they have, or maybe underestimate the skills. So we're linking occupations with job vacancies, with college courses, with volunteering, and indeed with training. So I really would like to conclude by just saying that in Derby City, what's really exciting is they recognise the importance of dialogue alongside the technology and the need for interpreters. So even the chatbot, which we're piloting in Derby, has got a, do you want to speak to a human advisor? Because most importantly, we believe that career support across the city is a safety net for all citizens. And that safety net, it's really important that when you have a community for which English is second other language, not a first language, that we can't just rely on the technology to solve the problems, but that Derby City itself is embracing technology alongside that human support. And I'll finish by saying that across England, a recent big careers conversation with young people, over 3,600 young people, head teachers and employers, shows that in England, many young people want career support, but they're struggling to find it. The gap between the advantaged and the disadvantaged children is widening, and that schools' budgets are squeezed, and so career guidance may well get squeezed further in the coming years. That learning loss between primary and secondary school, we're trying to actually ameliorate that effect by having this careers log that gets picked up when young people start secondary education. And we believe that technology has a major role to play in modern dimensions of career guidance. And we're on a journey. I'm very grateful to Fiona and to the LEP and to the City Council, to the University Vice-Chancellor and the college principal, and every one of the head teachers and the teachers across the city. There's a passion that's been ignited, and they're on a journey. And in 2025, we'll have even more results to share. Thank you.